The first cannon shot of the Second World War is fired on Danzig. Entering battle as if in a bygone age, the Polish cavalry charges the German tanks and is slaughtered.
The aim would be for the pincers to meet near Warsaw and Brest-Litovsk.
On the 25th of September, Hitler orders the bombing of Warsaw. The city is surrounded, but still holding out. The Polish army surrenders to the Germans, and in the east to the Soviets. 10th of May, 1940. At 5:35 a.m., the Germans unleash their offensive. The Germans are heading for the coast, and that the Allies have fallen into a trap. No tank could ever get through those densely forested hills. But nothing stops them. The British forces have left behind almost all of their equipment. 1940. At daybreak, the Germans march into Paris. The Nazi emblem, the swastika, flies over Paris. Taking off from these fields in occupied France, the Germans will attack convoys in the Channel, harbours and airfields in southern England. The British pilots hold out, giving everything they have.
They found easy pickings.
German bombers attack British cities like Coventry and London. This is the Blitz, daily bombings. Japan is about to attack the United States of America. The Japanese attack the British colony of Hong Kong. Then they bomb the American air bases in the Philippines and land on the Bataan Peninsula. Churchill severely underestimates the enemy. Hong Kong falls to Japan in just 17 days. The pride of the Royal Navy. They are both sunk by the Japanese in less than an hour. A fateful date, the end of Great Britain's dominion over the seas. In just 5 months, Japan has destroyed the Allied forces in the Far East and conquered half of the Pacific.
Half a million German troops swept down into Yugoslavia and Greece. He was poised to drive Britain out of the entire region.
Rommel believes in tanks and in the lightning war. He quickly orders the Afrika Korps to set off for the British positions. The first Wehrmacht sappers steal over onto Russian territory. They are followed by 153 German divisions, as well as by Finnish, Romanian, Slovakian, and Hungarian troops. In the south, the economic target, Kiev, and the Ukraine. The battle for Smolensk lasts 3 weeks. The Russians fight until the very end. Guderian continues to advance. In the meantime, the rest of the German forces, the 6th Army led by General Paulus, is marching towards Stalingrad. At that moment, the Red Army is going through its own ordeal. The Russians call it the Black Summer of 1942. That will close up around the oil fields in the Caucasus, and with Rommel advancing through Egypt, those in the Middle East. His other goal is Stalingrad, Stalin city and its factories. By September 1942, Paulus reaches the railway line that goes to Moscow. He manages to follow it all the way to Stalingrad. From there, they can control all of Stalingrad. On the 15th of October 1942, the Germans reach their goal, the great Russian river, the Volga. They fight to control even the tiniest village. Drive towards the Baku oil fields has come to a halt in the Caucasus Mountains. The world is holding its breath. Will Hitler defeat Stalin? Afrika Korps is just outside Egypt. The Wehrmacht occupies a third of Russia. The Imperial Navy of Japan controls the Pacific, and Germany's submarines are wreaking havoc in the Atlantic.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Admiral Yamamoto is on his way, at the head of the biggest armada ever put together. 200 battleships, and above all, an exceptional fleet of 8 aircraft carriers, transporting nearly 600 planes. On board are 5,000 Japanese Marines and a painter who's come along to immortalize the battle, Fujita. Chester Nimitz prepares to defend Midway. He has fewer aircraft carriers than Yamamoto, but he brings them all over to set up an ambush and then take off to attack the Japanese fleet. Torpedo Squadron 8 will strike first. The Allies open up a new front in North Africa, a first step towards controlling the Mediterranean. Montgomery launches his offensive with a preliminary artillery barrage, followed by a massive tank assault. But the German 88 flak guns cause tremendous losses. Rommel's soldiers counterattack relentlessly. Rommel retreats in order to surround the German army occupying Stalingrad. At 7 a.m., the Soviets obliterate the enemy's lines, pounding them with the rocket launchers they call Stalin's organs. Zhukov's massive army launches the offensive. The Germans see the Soviet tanks close the circle around them. General Paulus's 6th Army is trapped inside Stalingrad. Beyond the red flag is the Univermag store, where the commander of the 6th Army, General Friedrich Paulus, is entrenched. His men surrender. At the same time, the Allies win another victory. They enter Tunis. With its 88mm gun, the Tiger was the most dreaded of the German tanks. And Germany will launch a massive summer offensive, Operation Citadel, the biggest tank battle in history. 2,700 German tanks are preparing to combat 3,600 Soviet tanks. Field Marshal von Manstein. Is one of the biggest battles of the Second World War. The Wehrmacht troops are pushed back. The Great Patriotic War, as they call it, has taken a new turn for them. The Red Army is suddenly able to strike with a force that amazes all sides. An endless supply of men, even after the extremely costly battles of Moscow and Stalingrad. The eastern front is 1,000 kilometers wide, but the Russians are able to push forward hundreds of kilometers within 2 months, destroying 17 German army divisions. The Wehrmacht retreats towards East Prussia, leaving behind many thousands of casualties. The noose is tightening. Things are moving fast. The Germans invade Italy and have no qualms about slaughtering their former allies who attempt to resist. The Allies have landed in Italy, which is occupied by the Germans. The German paratroopers push them back. The German shock troops are now firmly entrenched in the ruined monastery. As the Wehrmacht retreats, it once again leaves a path of destruction behind it.
By early 1943, the Japanese Empire was at its height. The country had occupied Malaya and Burma, the Philippines, and the Dutch East Indies, Indonesia today.
At the same time, in southern England, the Allied war machine assembled for the Normandy landings is gearing up. On the evening of the 5th of June, the paratroopers get ready to leave over the Normandy region. The paratroopers are the first to set foot in occupied France. Atlantic Wall, a staggering system of fortifications stretching from Norway down to the Spanish border. The Allied fleet is on its way. It is the biggest armada ever assembled. Nearly 5,000 landing ships and assault craft, from the Seine to the Cotentin Peninsula, where the German Atlantic Wall defenses are the weakest. And neutralizing the German cannons with the help of the Royal Air Force's fighter bombers. As for the Russians, in the east, they are crossing the German border.
Could be heavy resistance.
In the west, the Allies are gaining the upper hand. For the Wehrmacht, the situation is deteriorating. 50,000 German soldiers are taken prisoner. It is a much-needed victory for the Allies. Most of the German army has retreated to the east. But the German offensive in the Ardennes failed, due to the extraordinary defense put up by the American paratroopers in Bastogne, to the intervention of General Patton's tanks, and to the overwhelming power of the Allied air forces. Power of the United States is such that just a few days after the Normandy landings in Europe, it's able to assemble a second fleet on the other side of the world, in the Pacific. Until now, it has remained untouched. Dresden, known as the Florence of the Elbe, was one of Europe's finest medieval cities.
His tanks north towards Berlin.
But his remaining soldiers, overwhelmed by the Russian rocket launchers, surrender one after the other. Beneath the ruins of the Chancellery in his underground bunker, Hitler rants and raves and maneuvers his imaginary armies. The war in the Pacific continues. The Marines raise the American flag on top of Mount Suribachi, the volcano that dominates the island of Iwo Jima. The battle took the lives of 7,000 Americans and 20,000 Japanese. It is now possible for the Boeing B-29 Superfortress bombers, taking off from Iwo Jima and other islands in the Pacific, to reach Japan.
1.5 million Soviet troops stormed into Manchuria and northern China. There were still over 1 million Japanese troops in the area, but the Red Army blitzkrieg was unstoppable. The Japanese position in the war had become untenable. Ferocious month-long battle to seize the Philippine capital.
In the Pacific, the suicide pilots that the Japanese call kamikaze nosedive their planes into the American fleet. In the end, the United States decides against an invasion of Japan, which it thinks will cost the country 1 million lives. Instead, it detonates the atomic Inferno. The first 2 nuclear bombs ever exploded kill in 1 second over 100,000 people, and finally enable the Emperor, Hirohito, to seek peace without losing face.
This is Belsen, another center of brutality, starvation, and disease. You see our troops moving in. It is these men who so strongly advocate the publication of these pictures, which show only in small part what they see in reality.